Are any of you catching any of this Derek Chauvin trial? Remember, he's the cop that kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes. I don't know about any of you, but my boys and I did BLM protests last summer. And we did the protest where you laid on the ground with your hands behind your back for 9.5 minutes. That's not an accident, especially when you have people literally telling you, get off, you're killing him. He's saying, I can't breathe. And then these lawyers during the trial want to act like literally everyone else is on trial except for this cop. They're saying that the crowd is to blame. They're saying that the victim is to blame. This is just white privilege and police brotherhood instead of a murder trial. And it's infuriating. Have you guys watched it?
You would agree that your own demeanor got louder and more frustrated and upset.
Frustrated, I'm not sure is the word I would use.
Angry?
More desperate.
And you called the officers a bitch, right?
Yeah. I got quite angry after Mr. Floyd was loaded into the ambulance, and there was no point in trying to reason with them anymore because they had just killed somebody. I don't know if you've seen anybody be killed, but it's upsetting.
Okay. Do you recall describing the crowd as a heavy crowd?
No, I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection to review the transcript of your statement?
I don't want to.
Okay.
This is just your friendly reminder that Derek Chauvin is a murderer. This trial is a farce. We saw what happened. We know what happened. George Floyd was murdered. And bringing out his criminal record and putting people on the stand isn't going to change the fact that Derek Chauvin crossed the line and murdered a man. Do not lose sight of that amongst the circus bullshit the defense attorney is pulling.
All right, part 2, here we go. This is now retired Sergeant David. Where do we remember him from? He's the person that 911 dispatcher called when she noticed something wasn't right at the scene. After receiving the phone call, he called Derek Chauvin on his personal cell phone, told him to turn off his body-worn camera so they could have a private conversation. But of course he won't implicate himself. He claims that Chauvin never told him that he used force and that all he said was he hurt his lip and suffered a medical emergency. But here's some key details in no particular order. At 8:49, he arrived on the scene, instructed Chauvin and the other officers to find witnesses. Chauvin responded that the witnesses were hostile. Why wouldn't they be? You just killed a man. Body camera footage shows them at the hospital at 9:05. Yes, that's Chauvin and Tao. This is when the sergeant claims that Chauvin for the first time told him about him kneeling on George Floyd's neck. Schuler dominated the courtroom today. He asked Ploger, how long would it have been reasonable for him to keep his knee there? And he said until they are controlled, handcuffed, and not fighting anymore. Oh, like before Chauvin even got there?
This is huge. The head of the Minneapolis Police Department Homicide Division just testified against Derek Chauvin. Listen to what he said.
Have you ever, in all the years you've been working for the Minneapolis Police Department, been trained to kneel on the neck of someone who is handcuffed behind their back in a prone position?
No, I haven't.
Is that, if that were done, would that be considered force?
Absolutely.
What level of force might that be?
That would be the top tier, the deadly force.
Why?
Because of the fact that if your knee is on a person's neck, that can kill them.
Period. What he's saying is that those officers have never been trained to kneel on somebody's neck when they are handcuffed on the ground and no longer a threat. And that Officer Chauvin should have known that what he was doing was using deadly force. Any further questions?
So I live in Minnesota. The big news around here, obviously, is the Chauvin trial. All I'm going to say about that trial is this. It should be over after just watching that fucking video. If you can come to any other conclusion than he was fucking murdered by a knee on his neck for over 9 minutes, then you're a fucking idiot. Don't talk to me about drugs in his system or any of that shit. Watch that video, and it's clear you're watching a fucking murder. There is no other logical conclusion. I fear for what happens if this guy gets off. I'm not going to get my hopes up because we've all seen it happen before. So, fingers crossed.
Toxins, for example, being responsible for Mr. Floyd's cardiac arrest, including potentially drugs.
In the sense that it might have informed our care, yes. There was, again, no report that this patient had, for example, overdosed on a specific medication such as calcium channel blocker or any other medication for which there might be a very specific antidote.
Oh, but I thought they said they found drugs in his
in that
mouth and
sense,
stuff.
I didn't feel that there was a specific toxin that we could give a medication for that would readily reverse his arrest.
Interesting.
And what about then hypoxia?
So hypoxia being, again, one of the most common causes of PEA asystole just in general.
I'm sorry, but these last few days of court have been bull. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. All we've been seeing for the last basically 2.5 days is a host of law enforcement officials attempting to distance themselves and distance their department for what one of their officers did. They're literally playing the classic one bad apple narrative. And I'm not here for it. Where was the chief when he shot Ira Tolles in the stomach? Where were the sergeants? Where were the lieutenants for the other 18 complaints that he had against him? Where were they? Did you feel like that for those other cases too? Or just this time because the camera was rolling?
Let me explain a little bit of why I think George Floyd's best friend is not testifying and is instead invoking his right to the Fifth Amendment. First of all, he had several outstanding warrants on the day of the incident. And second, he also passed a counterfeit bill on the same day George Floyd did. So if he was to be put on the stand, he would be incriminating himself. But also, the defense would have a field day with his credibility. So I don't think he would help George Floyd. I think he would hurt him because the defense would actually make several points with his testifying. So I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that he sold George Floyd drugs that killed him. Instead, I think it has everything to do with trial strategy and his own self-protection, which I've told you several times. Don't talk. Invoke your right to the Fifth Amendment. It's his right and he's doing it. And one more thing, even if they did drugs right before they went to that store, that does nothing but taint the jury. It does not prove that those drugs are what caused George Floyd's death.
Can we just agree that the defense's strategy of promoting this unruly crowd is so fucking tired at this point?
Even the paramedic that I'm watching right now, who just told prosecution basically everything he did, this is the second paramedic, not the one who drove, even him, when he finally got to the point, where she asked, did anything in his condition change? And he said, when I got to the scene, he was deceased. When I dropped him off at the hospital, he was deceased. And he's head down, visibly upset. The only person I have not seen any emotion from is the defendant.
A lot of people are mispronouncing his last name. I'm seeing a lot of people say Chauvin. That's not right. It's actually French, and it's pronounced murderer.
Well, a lot of people here are missing the boat. See here. Yes, and nasty, and political, and racist, and I've removed those comments. The bottom line is this. I don't know what George Floyd is all about. He could be a bum. I don't even know what his record is. I don't know if he was high or not. I haven't seen toxicology. I don't care. There's no reason for any police officer anywhere to remain with his knee pressed against someone's jugular vein and carotid artery on his neck for 9 minutes when the purpose is cuffed. No excuse. That's it. Period. Done. I don't care what he did. Well, he tried to pass a $20 counterfeit bill, allegedly, and for that he got murdered? He could have been tased, he could have been maced, but instead he was murdered. And that's what this is all about, and nothing else. Murder.
I was recently thinking about the Derek Chauvin trial. whom you may remember as the police officer that killed George Floyd. And at this time, the trial is still ongoing. And I was reminded of something that I heard a journalist that I really like say, a fellow named Robert Evans, who does a history podcast called Behind the Bastards. It was during one of the podcasts that he discusses the history of fascism that he said something along the lines of, for most people, a government is a social contract, but for fascists, the government is a gun. And obviously the gun is used against those that fascists believe to be undesirable. So as you listen to people try to justify the murder of George Floyd, ask them, what is it that keeps them from being undesirable? The answer, of course, is nothing, because there is no group that is safe from fascists, even other fascists.
Okay, and as you were standing there seeing all this, how were you feeling?
As I was sitting there, I just was really trying to keep my professionalism in this and make sure that I speak out for Floyd's life, because I felt like he was in very much danger, and I seen another man like me, you know, being controlled in a way where.
Yeah, let me just.
This is.
Stop. That answers the question. We'll ask another question.
And were you scared for yourself?
Yes, I was totally scared for my safety, and people.
This whole trying to pin drug use as the reason George Floyd died is just absolute bull. You shouldn't need to be in peak physical health in order to survive an encounter with the police for something as menial as a fake $20 bill. It shouldn't matter if you have a history of drug abuse. Your interaction with the police officer shouldn't be so brutal that it causes you to die.
Day 3 was rough. The big takeaway from today is that we were able to see the body camera footage of all 4 officers who were on the scene. Mysteriously, Chauvin's body camera ended up on the ground under the car. But let's get into the witnesses. Christopher Martin was 18 at the time and an employee at Cup Foods. He suspected the money was counterfeit and reported to his manager. But pause. Lest we not forget, the only people who are at fault here are the police officers, not any of the witnesses or bystanders. They are already feeling guilt. Defense declined to cross-examine 2 of the key witnesses. Charles McMillan, go look up his testimony, because he was all of us today. Footage and testimony from Christopher Belfry shows that George Floyd was already detained before Chauvin even got to the scene. He was in handcuffs. Going into day 4, what's really burning in my mind is who went with the paramedic? What was the paramedic's assessment as they were leaving the scene? And what exactly happened between 8:29 and 9:29? He was pronounced dead. Live tomorrow at 10:30 a.m.
I've gotten a few comments from people asking for my take on the Derek Chauvin trial, and I really appreciate you wanting my perspective on it, so I'm going to tell you why I haven't been covering it. I've been preparing myself for him to be found not guilty, and that's just... With that mindset, I do not want to rewatch the video. I don't want to see his loved ones cry on the stand. I don't want to see all the evidence laid out in a clear and concise manner just to have the defense come out and try to fucking discredit witnesses and paint George Floyd with this negative brush. The fact that there's video of it makes everything I just said worse. If he is not found guilty, it is going to rehash racial trauma that so many in our country have had to endure. Now, once a verdict is reached, I'll do a video about it, but until then, you will not see me discussing it because it would just be me yelling and cursing.
Ladies and gentlemen, the volume inside of this bus is astronomical.
Okay, Blue Lives Matter, which is just basically code for I'm a total fucking racist in 2021. So it was the drugs that killed him, not Derek Chauvin putting his knee on his neck for 10 minutes. Is that literally what you're trying to say? Wow.
I think this is affecting me mentally. Like long-term shit, it's gonna fuck with me. I think that this is gonna fuck me up.
Oh, you must be new here. Allow me to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Bree. I'm an addict. In 2015, I was charged with a felony-level drug offense, along with a slew of disorderly persons offenses. Upon the completion of my cases, the attorneys that represented me on some of them decided to give me a shot and hire me to work in their firm and then provide me with the training to become a legal assistant. Let's just get right to the point here. If it had been my neck under that officer's knee, you would not be questioning my criminal history. You would not be questioning if I was on drugs or not. It's very likely that you saw my video and never stopped to consider that I might also be a felon with a drug problem. Why? Because I don't fit your very narrow stereotype of what you believe a criminal looks like. The truth is, I'm a product of luck and privilege, nothing more. Through my experience both being in the system myself, as well as working on the other side for people who are in the system, I've learned that you cannot judge somebody's character or their intentions based on their history. And a person's criminal record does not justify their death in any way.
I'm gonna tell you right now, with all the bullshit that we have seen this year, if this Chauvin guy takes the stand, we taking a fucking day off school. I ain't fucking going to work. I ain't going to work any of the days that he on the stand. I gotta hear what the fuck he has to say about this dumb shit.
This is a hard question for me to answer because I've only heard part of the state's case and nothing from the defense yet. But the defense did make some good points yesterday with the ER doctor when the doctor testified that fentanyl actually increases the amount of carbon dioxide in your system. So that being a pre-existing condition maybe didn't cause his death, but it was certainly something that contributed to his death. And I don't think that he'll ever be convicted of murder because I don't think he intended to kill him. I just think he showed a reckless disregard for George Floyd's life. And the supervisor yesterday testified that the procedure that he used was not standard and should not have been done. So in my book, he gets convicted of manslaughter because he didn't intend to kill him. He just did not take care of him or notice the signs of the man dying on the street. That's a manslaughter conviction, reckless disregard of his life. My 2 cents.